Hello, my name is Tony.
Here's the thing, I love this film. Not as much as Get Carter, Sit in Target, or The Long Good Friday, but I do love it. For many reasons, it's right up my street. The critical reception was admittedly choppy, split between the OK cabal and some dismissive dim bulbs. But by my reckoning, it's one of the great British gangster flicks. It has more in common with Sit in Target than the others, because for a long time, it too was neglected, even to some extent forgotten about or ignored completely. It's a mystery to me why this should be. If you've seen it, it may also be a mystery to you. And if you haven't, then maybe I can persuade you to give it the once-over. And maybe you'll be just as mystified as everyone else. Sort of an impromptu psychological gift, if you like. Or a curse. Anyway. You know what defines the Oscars for me? No, of course you don't, because I've never said, so how could you? Stupid fucking question, Bush. I'll tell you though. What defines the Oscars for me exposes it as a self-congratulatory think tank ego wank, fake-assed, over-politicized anti-meritocracy shamfest resides simply in those people who never won a fucking Oscar. And there are only two individuals I need to cite to make my point. There are many others I could, but two is all I need. So no requirement to go overboard. As if. Alfred Hitchcock and Richard Burton. That is why the Oscars and all it stands for is a complete and utter waste of oxygen, time and space. Hitchcock, the most influential, inspirational, innovative and creatively peerless director of all time. And Burton, one of the greatest screen actors to ever draw breath. They never won an Oscar, those guys. Hitch was nominated for Best Director for Rebecca, Lifeboat, Spellbound, Rear Window and Psycho. What? No Vertigo, North by Northwest, The Birds? Oh, of course not. Absolutely fucking criminal. Burton was nominated for Best Actor 7 times. In My Cousin Rachel, The Robe, Beckett, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Anne of the Thousand Days and Equus. Burton lost to Anthony Quinn, William Holden, Rex Harrison, Paul Schofield, Lee Marvin, John Wayne and Richard Dreyfuss. Much as I'm a fan of the Duke and Lee Marvin, come the fuck on. And Richard fucking Dreyfuss, for the Goodbye Girl, someone go get me a fucking brandy. So there you have it in a nutshell, all you need to know and understand about the Oscars in order to figure out what it's all about and why I don't give this nauseating shit show the time of day. Just look at those who didn't get one. Easy. Burton takes the lead in Villain. He's Vic Dakin, an East End gang boss with personality traits drawn from the Cray twins. He's a terrific fit, as it turns out. That distinctive voice twisted and compressed into a menacing, gravelly Cockney snarl. Physically, he adopts the dimensions of a seething thug, poised to explode into violence and sadistic rage at any point with fists or a straight razor. Psychologically twisted, a savage homosexual with a mother fixation and a pathological disgust for any women other than his dear old ma. He is Ronnie and Reggie symbiotically stitched into one body. It's as fearsome, fascinating and compelling a performance as he's ever given. As you would expect then, Villain is his showcase all the way. Just to give the audience a flavour of what Dakin is about. The film opens with the main man and two of his henchmen lurking in the apartment of a loose-lipped croupier, Benny Stephen Shepherd. They're waiting for him to come home from a night shift at the casino. When he turns up with a young female work colleague in tow, Dakin packs her off to make some tea. As for Benny, the shag he was expecting with a nubile blonde has turned into a different kind of fuck. The old fuck, I'm fucked and about to be fucked up kind. As Dakin and his cronies are leaving the building, one of them guides him out of the path of blood dripping down onto the pavement. High above, thereby hangs the hapless croupier, tied to a kitchen chair, cut to ribbons with a razor, bleeding all over the scenery. Not the best start to your day, but a good way to set the tone of the film to follow. Vic is a London crime boss who runs his organisation with a rod of induced fear. Anyone gets out of line, he will visit some bad shit upon them. If they don't get out of line, he might still visit some bad shit upon them, but the chances are fractionally less. So people know where they stand. He's not ostentatious, not a white-collar crim, lives frugally in a terraced house on a quiet London street, with his elderly mother who he idolises and dotes on, taking her cups of tea in bed, and out in the car for day trips to Brighton for a bag of whelks and the sea air. For a sadistic paranoid madman, he's not all bad. Coppers Inspector Matthews, Nigel Davenport and Sergeant Binney Colin Welland are on Vic's case, but can't really pin anything on him, which is why they're using their grass Danny Anthony Sager, a shady lowlife on the fringes of Dakin's circle, to keep them informed as to his activities. Danny pitches a heist opportunity to Vic, hitting the payroll of a plastics factory, the skinny on which is provided by a disgruntled senior clerk, Brown James Cozzins, who wants some easy cash to abandon his wife and run away to the sun with his floozy. Vic is tempted, but the score would take place on the turf of Vic's more business-like counterpart Fletcher, T.P. McKenna, and his partner and brother-in-law Edgar, Joss Ackland. In a meeting, Fletcher grants his permission for the robbery to go ahead, on condition he gets his cut and Vic uses his men. Vic wants to use his own team, but compromises, suggesting that Fletcher and Edgar go along instead. Vic can turn on a degree of persuasive charm when the need arises, and he talks Fletcher round, exploiting their past friendship and shared history. The job is on. Vic's casual sexual partner is Wolf Ian McShane. Wolf is a hustler pimp who procures girls and sometimes boys to cater for the sexual needs of celebrities and politicians at private parties thrown in discreet country houses. He's not above coercing his girlfriend Venetia Fiona Lewis to participate in these events. Prior to sex, Vic's idea of foreplay is to punch Wolf in the guts a few times. Ah, sweet! The impression given is Wolf goes along with the relationship because the alternative doesn't really bear thinking about. A sore belly and butthole being infinitely preferable to a cutthroat razor to the esophagus. Things start going off the rails for Vic. The payroll heist is a chaotic and violent mess, resulting in security personnel sustaining life-changing injuries, Fletcher with half his face torn off and ending up in hospital, and the weak and sickly Edgar stashing the cash somewhere only he knows and getting hospitalised with a perforated stomach ulcer. Matthews and Binney know Dakin is in the frame for the job because their grass Danny set it up. Vic needs an alibi and orders Wolf to sort him one. To this end, Wolf procures Benny's girlfriend Patty Elizabeth Knight to fulfil the depraved sexual needs of Parliamentary MP Gerald Draycott Donald Sinden at another party. He then, with the use of illicit photographs of his activities, blackmails Draycott into providing Vic with an alibi. Although he's off the hook, Vic's mother chooses this inopportune moment to stiff it. Reeling from grief and unstable at the best of times, Dakin recklessly orders his men to kidnap Edgar from the hospital. Edgar, in seriously poor health, is forced to take Dakin and Wolf to where he stashed the loot, in some old tunnels adjoining an inner-city wasteland. When police sirens are heard in the distance, Dakin reasons that Edgar has sold him out. He shoots him dead, then walks out to greet Inspector Matthews, and ultimately face trial by a system he still believes he can corrupt and manipulate. His final paranoid roar at the camera is a classic 70s movie ending. Villain has an intriguing genesis. The screenplay was written by Dick Clement and Ian LaFreniere, who traditionally scripted TV situation comedies, most famously The Likely Lads and Porridge. They'd written 2 previous movie scripts for the Tom Courtenay comedy thriller Otley in 1968, and Michael Winner's atypical war movie Hannibal Brooks the same year. This was their darkest and most uncharacteristic piece, a deviation from material that was far lighter in tone and content. It's based on a novel, The Burden of Proof, by James Barlow, but their script was adapted from a screen treatment by Al Lettieri. Yes, you heard that right. That Al Lettieri, US actor in films such as The Godfather, The Getaway and McHugh. Go figure. The screenplay is liberally peppered with pithy and acidic dialogue, and it's a tight and controversial little number, quite daring for the time in its open references to gay and sadomasochistic sex. Although an explicit sex scene between Burton and McShane was filmed, it was cut from the final print, felt to be a bit too challenging for the BBFC, who most likely would have ordered it removed anyway. It dares to depict the idea of sex trafficking to satisfy the carnal urges of the rich and famous. Donald Sinden's predatory lip-smacking and lascivious MP is like a prototype Prince Andrew. The world of Jeffrey Epstein is clearly not a new one then. There are some standout moments, the most thrilling being the heist itself. It is so fierce, grounded, chaotic and bone-crushingly violent, the filming and editing so deft and immersive that it sets the heart racing and puts the viewer on the edge of their seat. Director Michael Tuckner, who would later deliver Fear is the Key, crafts a full-on depiction of a technologically primitive wages blag in all its sordid and unflinching glory. It's all baseball bats, fists, feet, coloured tear gas, bolt cutters, blood, metal security rods and crashing cars. Marvellous frenzied stuff. There is the unbridled savagery of Dakin losing his shit and dishing out a beating in a strip joint to the wages Clark Brown. Burton unleashes hell upon the hapless dupe, nearly killing him in a blast of unrestrained primal ferocity. And the film's closing scene, as mentioned earlier, is a stone-cold classic with an undiminished power to chill.
Who are you looking at?
Richard Burton has been criticised by critics with little imagination or attention span for having a dodgy accent, for being histrionic, over the top, hamming it up. But I would disagree. He's clearly drawing inspiration from the excesses of the real-life Cray twins, not exactly paragons of restraint, whilst also referencing James Cagney's mother-fixated Cody Jarrett in White Heat. He knows how to play it right up to the hilt, but is skilled enough to tone it down for effect. It's in the quieter moments we visualise the devious cogs turning behind Dakin's glittering eyes, when he speaks in softer tones, when we get that true sense of the depths of his malevolence and menace. Burton succeeds in playing it larger than life whilst keeping it real and believable. It's a tricky balancing act, but he pulls it off, and I think it's up there with his best screen work. There's a great scene when he visits Edgar's used car business, one he's just had his men vandalise. Everyone knows he's to blame and he knows everyone knows, so he has some malicious fun, suggesting with an innocent smirk that it was probably kids, and musing that they should bring back national service. Innocuous comments, but the way he uses them as a thinly veiled threat and warning of things potentially to come is absolutely masterful. Burton fucking owns this film. Ian McShane would turn up in a similar role as Ollie Reed's sidekick in Sitting Target. His charming rogue act is one he first perfected here. The facade is of an easy-going, cheeky-chappy ladies' man, but underneath he's a cold-hearted, manipulative pimp who will sell his own girlfriend for sex and bed down with a psychotic monster to further his aims. Yet McShane still manages to make him somehow likeable, until you start to think about it, that is. There's an impressive roster of character actors making up the supporting cast, familiar faces from films and TV plays and shows of the time. Fiona Lewis and Elizabeth Knight provide early 70s sexual glamour, both visually gorgeous actresses, both their characters horribly mistreated by Wolf. At least Lewis's character eventually wakes up and bails out after a confrontation with Wolf and Dakin. Good for her. You go, girl. Yep, I mean go. As in, go away. Quickly. The London of the time is shabby, downcast, stricken with social malaise, evocatively captured by cinematographer Christopher Challis, who had done such sterling work on Billy Wilder's The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes the previous year. Score by Jonathan Hodge, not the most prolific of composers, is an atmospheric combination of sombre and plaintive strings and faintly discordant orchestral soundscapes in the background. Villain sits comfortably in the company of Get Carter, Sitting Target and The Long Good Friday in the canon of 70s Brit gangster noir. It's not as cruelly elegant as Carter or Friday, nor as clinically brutalist as Target. It's sort of in its own niche, set slightly apart, not least by the novelty of a big star like Burton in the sort of role he would not usually be associated with in the sort of modestly budgeted production about as far removed from Hollywood as Cricklewood is. It's not without flaws, but it is compulsive viewing and fine grisly entertainment, and for me at least, absolutely essential. Thanks for your time and attention. There's a western I feel like revisiting next, perhaps one of the last traditional westerns Hollywood ever made, but we'll see. Until then, take good care of yourselves, because if you don't, who will? Your mother?